hello, everybody. Yes. Welcome to the party. My name is Brenda. I work for the British Council. I'm the head of arts in Nigeria, and I'm also the lead for creative economy for the Africa region. And I know you've heard creative economy all day today. So when you're thinking about your questions, just keep those in mind. I'm introducing Vuyisile Mshudulu from South Africa. Vuyisile Mshudulu, I'm so sorry, is the Director of Arts, Culture and Heritage in the city of Johannesburg, with an experience that spans 25 years in the creative industries. Mshudulu encompasses a wealth of experience and unique mix of expertise, having worked in both private and public sector. His areas of expertise include policy development, promotion, and the development of the creative industries. He has vast program and project management experiences in enterprise development and market access, both locally and internationally in the creative industries. Mshudulu is a specialist in cultural diplomacy and governance. Please welcome him with a round of applause. So, to my right is my wonderful colleague, Rashida Nalumoso, who is program manager for our creative economy work on the African continent, based out of Uganda. She's also a creative producer. Rashida. Can I check if our friends are great? So we have two people joining us online from Nigeria and from Kenya. Unfortunately, travel happened to everybody and they couldn't be here. So the first person is Victor Mark Onyegbu. He's the head of grants portfolio at Africa No Filter, overseeing grant making and programming in Africa's creative economy and media sectors, and sits on the senior leadership of the organization and on the board of several NGOs. Before joining ANF, he was regional program manager at the British Council and designed and executed various British Council creative economy programs in Nigeria, West Africa, and Sub-Saharan Africa. I'm going to welcome Victor. Hi, Victor.
Hello, Brenda. I hope I'm audible enough.
Yes, you are.
All right,
and then
so
I'm
much.
introducing Mercy Kihwaga, an experienced program manager with a rich background spanning diverse sectors of economic development, currently leading groundbreaking research projects focused on advancing the creative economy across Africa. Through these strategic research endeavors and collaborative partnerships, Mercy spearheads efforts to foster innovation and entrepreneurship and sustainable growth within this vibrant sector. Before diving into the creative economy, Mercy successfully helmed capacity building programs in project finance and infrastructure development. Welcome to Mercy. Hi, Mercy.
Hi, Brenda.
First of all, I'm really sorry you guys aren't here. I was really looking forward to this panel in person, but I'm going to try my best not to leave you out of the conversation. So yeah, this topic, I wanted to be very clear. When you read it, it sounds like, what in the world? What's my business? Why am I here? African cities, what has that got to do with me? And it's very important that you understand that you can't build your own airport, you can't tar your own roads, you can't make water only for yourself. So whatever services your city provides or what they do not provide affects the way you deliver your business, your passion, your work. So it affects you, whether you think it doesn't or not. Now, that is the mundane. When you think about the work that you do, for example, the Pecha Kucha, where she said she was able to go to the community and walk on those streets, if you didn't get permission from the municipality, you won't be able to do anything. So it's important the way African cities frame culture and what possibilities, what capacities you can enjoy because of the way the city has framed the way they view culture, the way they support it. Am I right, Vuyisile? I think your mic is, okay. Yeah. So tell us a little bit about what you do for the city of Johannesburg.
Firstly, good afternoon to everybody, and thank you for joining us for this session.
I wish I had 7 days to answer that question because there's so much that we do. Many of you would know that the city of Johannesburg is one of the most culturally diverse cities, if not the most culturally diverse city in the world. And it is true to the character of the city of being such a welcoming space and such an embracing and culturally tolerant space. And what that then does for us as, technocrats and policymakers is that it creates a very positive crisis for us to try and navigate. So what we do is that our work is structured mainly in two main forms. Firstly, is to create an enabling environment for culture to thrive, and there's a whole lot involved in that statement, which we can unpack. But the long and short is that we have to, as a city, create the mechanisms, create the platforms, create the infrastructure, create the support mechanisms, create the investment-friendly environment for artists and creatives to be able to practice, to thrive, and even to grow entrepreneurially. And what we do is that there's a concept in economics which now takes us to the second frame of what we do. There's a concept in economics called market failure. So what we then do as a city is that we look at what exists in the industry, what private partners do, what developmental organizations do, and where they are unable to make an impact, then we will then curate and design programs that will respond to those areas. And most of the work that happens in the second part of our work is also structured in three ways. One being talent identification and cultivation. There's a whole lot of work that we do there. And then the second is, looking at intermediary spaces for emerging artists to make sure that they have the right platforms to showcase their work, and those that just want to have cultural practice and not necessarily for commercial reasons, also able to find practice. Then we also then create platforms for mainstreaming of artists into mainstream spaces, some of the spaces that we own, some of the spaces we facilitate, both nationally and internationally. So in a nutshell, that's what we do.
A round of applause for the city of Joburg. Guys, I'm coming from Lagos. A round of applause for the city of Joburg. So if I was going to ask just one question on top of that, do you think, as it is now, you can capture the insights, the impact of the work that you're doing as the city, not what people are doing externally, but for yourselves? Are you able to see clearly, where people need the support and where they don't?
So, the impact of our work can be measured both qualitatively but also quantitatively. And I must say that it is a general weakness in South Africa to, be more meticulous in the way that we measure the impact of our work because we are so immersed in the work itself. But what we can say confidently is that the successes that you see South Africa registering across the world, a large part of that finds its genesis in the initiatives that happen in the city of Johannesburg. So the Johannesburg has become a catalyst for what South African culture becomes, both nationally as it is appreciated, but also as to how it is positioned globally. And that's how we measure. But also, if you look at the growth in terms of the critical mass of practitioners across the value chain, you see that there's a growth in terms of both the number of people involved, but also in terms of the benefits that accrue to the number of people involved. And this is not just at a production level, but also at other services levels of the value chain, whether it's people that do distribution, whether it's people that do marketing, people that host events, and so on, technical services. And all of these things are resident within the city of Johannesburg.
Thank you. And that gives me the opportunity to introduce the Creative Vibrancy Index for Africa. A few people may have heard about this tool, but I'm going to leave it to the two experts online to talk to us about it. So I'm going to start with Victor, who was the commissioning company for the Creative Vibrancy Index for Africa. So Victor, can you tell us very simply what this is about?
Thank you so much, Brenda, and good to share the stage with Mercy and Vuyisile. I love what Vuyisile has just said and the intentionality of the city of Johannesburg in promoting arts and culture and creativity. I wish I could answer the question very simply, but I'll do my best. The Vibrancy Index started out as an initiative of Africa No Filter. We are an organization working with creative storytellers on the continent to shape narratives about Africa. And to do this more effectively, we realized sometime in 2021, 3 years ago, that there was a need to evaluate the conditions within which storytellers are expected to join us in delivering on this wonderful mission for the continent. There was a need to assess what tools, what frameworks, what enabling environments or disabling environments, and what operational contexts that existed.
This is why I don't like this online thing. This is it. Can I ask Mercy? Mercy, are you able to continue from where Victor stopped?
Yes, sure. So for us, the index was a way of us learning how we can build the ecosystem. And for sure, part of the reasons why the index was important is because we do understand that the ecosystem has a lot of challenges in terms of actionable data. And so we are looking at how is the environment looking and what are the current existing things, even in terms of the regulatory environment, even in terms of the physical attributes, the hubs, the festivals and all that. So for us, it's very important that this tool is here live with us. And I'll take you through a demo later on, but for now, I think the most interesting thing that so far we are hearing about Johannesburg and through the index does demonstrate that Johannesburg is actually one of the cities where they're thriving in terms of cultural vibrancy.
Thank you. Is Victor back? Victor, can you say hello? Maybe not. So I'm going to go to my colleague, Rashida. When you look
Hello?
okay, you're back. Can you hear me?
I'm so sorry. I don't know what happened. I'm really sorry about that.
It's fine.
I don't know at what point you stopped hearing me.
When you were telling us from 2021.
Oh, all right, yeah. So, yeah, so really, that was how, the idea about the index came about. We were really looking at the landscape and trying to scope the landscape. If we're asking storytellers to join us on this mission, what environments exist for them to do the stuff that they do? How enabling is that environment? And that was really the driving force and the thought around initiating the index. And so we came up with this idea to profile the storytelling landscape, and that's what the index is really about. And so the index looks into providing a ranking and an evaluation of infrastructure, of policies, of environment that supports and promotes arts, culture, and creativity, and how these impact on storytelling of creatives in African cities. So that's really what the index is about.
Thank you very much, Victor. So I'm going to my
Thanks.
colleague Rashida, because at the British Council, sometimes it feels like what we just do is grant making. But it's important to know that even when we want to do grant making, there's a lot of research that goes into it. We don't just decide, we're going to give money to filmmakers today or dressmakers tomorrow. It's because we've done the research. And the research sometimes might be a year or 2 years old. But we're looking at the trends, we're looking at the insights, we're talking to the stakeholders, we're talking to the government, and then that informs our decision. And we were financial contributors to the index, but what we found, how important the index became, was to the work we were doing with African cities. So I'm going to have Rashida talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's really exciting. And when we think about the case for cities and culture, sometimes it's easier to advocate for a city as opposed to a country. We see a lot of traction. If you think about cities globally, it's the city that comes to mind first, sometimes in your mind. The global cities make their mark and for reasons of the city as its own ecosystem of thriving cultures, communities, bringing people together for vibrant driving of creative economies. And as part of our work, we're really interested in how we can look at different ways to advocate for the creative economy, whether that is at a city level or at a country level. So the opportunity to particularly drive forward an agenda for African cities, where we know mobility across this continent is difficult. We're not meeting each other. If people can't move, goods can't move. The opportunity to cross-dialogue as cities is a strength and leverage that I think can be welcomed, particularly if we think about the opportunity of global city impact. So our partnership with the World Cities Culture Forum was really interesting because it's a network of influential cities across the world. 40 city members, states, countries are represented, and only 2 are in Africa. That's a deficit. We're not represented globally when we should be. And we need to meet each other within the continent. So our partnerships, using our networks to try to drive forward a conversation around the importance of cities as economic drivers of growth, has been really interesting, where you're looking at the opportunity not to just drive forward a conversation with policymakers, but with artists to try to look at tangible tools such as the Vibrancy Index, where we can actually start a conversation about what we know is happening across the continent. We know there's vibrant, thriving cultural ecosystems here, but if we can't have tangible data to put even in the hands of the policymakers, how can they advocate when it comes to their different departments and different government level lobbying opportunities that are really key to also unlocking funds within a city level. So I think that's how we can operate as an organization, and I think the partnerships that we've formed and looking at what the Vibrancy Index has resulted in has been very exciting for us as an organization, because we can see that it's really a clear, tangible tool to ignite that conversation when we know the work is there, but sometimes it's just not, if it's not visible, how do we measure, how do we map it, how do we take it forward?
Thank you, Rashida. So I want to bring it home so that you can, let it come home to you how the city's work matter. In 2018, I came to Johannesburg for the Obama Leadership Conference, and it was colleagues from all over the continent, from Mauritius, from Madagascar, from Algeria, Tunisia, and we found that some people were traveling for 3 days to come to Johannesburg because there were no hubs for people to fly directly, or at least maybe take one flight and then the second flight to Johannesburg. Some people traveled to Europe to come to Johannesburg. It was the most ridiculous thing. And that was the first time I found out that Africa was zoned, you know, and so this zone and this zone has partnership, and this zone and this zone didn't have partnership. So as a result, trade was challenging. And if you can't even move things, move human beings from one side of Africa to the next side of Africa, how will you move trade? There are countries that are landlocked. They don't have coasts. So it means things have to come to them by air or by train or by road, you know. And if you don't have partnerships and treaties and all of those things, it means that some people are not benefiting from the continent. That was in 2018. Things have changed a little bit, but there's still quite a lot of problems around that. So I just wanted to bring it home to you, what the city's situation can be. And because of culture, an intangible good, you know, it's not something that you can see. We trade it the way we're speaking and talking and enjoying it, you know, with ourselves. It's even more difficult when you're trying to tell people the value, you know, of the culture that you're trying to build, or you're trying to share, or you're trying to own. So I just wanted you to have an idea of why the city's work is important and how the Vibrancy Index, you know, sits on that. So I'm going to ask Victor to clearly tell us, so who is this tool for?
Thank you so much, Brenda. The tool, well, I'll first start by saying that it's an open access tool, right? So it can be used by everybody, and that's how it's been designed. But more specifically, it's been designed to provide the much needed data for investors, for funders, for creative entrepreneurs, and other stakeholders within the storytelling system by offering them a lens into the gaps in the creative and cultural landscape on the continent. As an investor, for instance, if I were interested in the film industry, I would probably be interested in finding out how many cinema screens are available to serve a population of over 20 million people in Lagos. That's an example. What's the implication for the film distribution and distribution of other IP content on the continent? And do I see an opportunity here, or do I see a challenge here? So it's really a very important tool for making business decisions on the continent. And we have a creative economy that is opening up for business. It's bustling with lots of ideas and creativity. Young people on the continent have become, a gold mine, and the creativity that they expel, the creativity that they express, is something that has become a huge business potential for the continent. And I think it's very important that we have information, data, statistics that allows investors understand who to pitch their tent when they are talking about the creative economy in Africa. It's also very important for those in the academia. I believe that having all of our information being centralized within an open access database is going to be particularly helpful for research purposes and for all other purposes that happens within the academic world. It's also going to enhance decision-making by stakeholders in the industry. So we are talking about policymakers now, because it provides a comparative view of the landscape across 12 cities and all of that, and we're looking to expand. So for instance, when you go into the database section of the portal, you would see, and I'm sure Mercy can speak to this, you can filter by cities and do a comparison and see what the venues and the facilities availability is in Accra versus what it is in Lagos and what it is in Johannesburg and so on. So we see that there's a lot to do by policymakers in this regard. And there's also one last piece, and I'm going to end here, is the fact that it provides, it's a learning tool for policymakers, because the idea of the index is not just for people to see that one city ranked top, the other city is ranking at the bottom. That's not the total idea. It's part of it, but it's not the total idea. The idea is also to have the cities that ranked not so well be able to exchange and learn and do some peer-to-peer engagement with cities that ranked well on certain indicators. And so you can see that it's a very important learning tool for policymakers, very important tool also for design cultural exchange programs as well. And so it cuts across. When you say who the tool is for, it cuts across policy making, it cuts across business decisions by investors and those in the academia, and also creative practitioners, you and I and people in the creative field in entirety. And so it's a very awesome tool for the ecosystem, the creative ecosystem on the continent.
Thank you. And before we keep talking about the tool, we're going to show you a little bit of what it looks like, and so that you understand all of these things that we're saying. Are we ready? Okay. It's the video. Okay. City of Johannesburg. Give yourself a round of applause. So, and when I first saw this last year, honestly, I was moved to tears. Not because I just want to cry, but it made me realize that as creatives, artists, policymakers, we're thinking beyond just the bread and butter of the work we do. You understand? It's something I say to a lot of creatives. At the moment, every creative on this continent is a pioneer. And we've been pioneers for 20, 30 years. The seeds that we're sowing now is for the generation that is 15 years old, to be able to have a vibrant industry that makes them wealthy in the next 20 years. So it's important, that we don't stay in our lane and we don't stay in the silo of, I'm a painter, I'm a filmmaker, I'm a writer. We all need to contribute, to making sure that we have the enabling environment for the sector. And if I was going to go forward with our conversation, how did you feel seeing that index and the ranking for Joburg?
Well, it's quite exciting, but I wanted to backtrack to something you mentioned earlier about, the challenges, particularly infrastructure challenges of the continent of Africa. I think as Africans, we really need to be kind with ourselves, given, the mammoth beast of colonialism that we are dealing with, and we must never think that we are post the colonial capture. And I think that one of the instruments that have really helped us as a continent to be more resilient towards colonialism and colonial influence and colonial domination has been culture. And even in our aspiration towards a decolonized utopia, culture becomes one of the instruments that we use to navigate towards that utopia. And this tool has been, for me, in many ways, an encapsulation of our resilience as an African people. It has also been a very important tool to measure the extent to which we have made progress in really getting ourselves to believe in our self-determination, but also to define ourselves in our own terms as Africans. So I really think it's really an exciting moment for us to celebrate and to be able to have something that is tangible, something that generations to come will refer to and say that the generation that preceded us, these are the kinds of interventions that they've created to make sure that culture becomes one of those, catalysts for vibrancy. Because our understanding of vibrancy as Africans is really about life.
Yes.
It's a matter of life and death. It's not about entertainment and fun, It's really about questions of identity, questions of existence, questions of survival, questions of really, occupying and claiming our space in the world. So that's what vibrancy means to us. And it's quite exciting. Skinder was referring to the Venice Biennale. If you look at many of the global cultural spaces, they are beginning to recognize Africa, but we must never allow those spaces to define what Africa is. We need to take the lead in defining what Africa is and be able to write that down, to sing about it, and to create productions that speak to that. And I was really excited to see Kawe Kumalo, the work that they do in Zimbabwe, to reinterpret who we are, but in ways that really maintain the essence of who we are and not bastardize that. Yeah, so that's what makes me excited. And lastly, I think we really owe Andani Africa, one of the most creative companies in South Africa, a round of applause for putting together a very user-friendly instrument through this index. Thank you very much.
Okay, so they collaborated, but I want Mercy to tell us about the vision of this project, because I know Africa No Filter wanted to do something about changing narratives. Why did we use technology? Why did we focus on this as, the first thing? Mercy.
The first thing we needed to do is to have accessible and a highly visible approach, and this is what the index focused on. And so for us, in terms of the index, we were keen to see how do Africa's cultural assets in the cities look like. What is the data that exists for investors? What insights does this data give us in terms of our cultural performance? And then also looking at comparable data, comparing one city to another. This platform allows you to compare Johannesburg to Nairobi, and that way, with the gaps there, you're able to make actionable. You're able to make actionable activities to grow the ecosystem. And sometimes when I look at the index itself and how we built it, and looking at the technological application, for some of these things, for us to get to a point of identifying the hubs in, for example, Ghana, we had to rely on things like Google Earth for us to be able to also come up with a density of what are the activities taking place in each of the cities. Where could I find a workspace as a creative? Where could I find a museum if I'm touring the continent? So the technology has really played a big part for us, and we believe that even it's going to continue playing a big part in terms of building the insights. And if you look at even the methodology that we applied for us to get into the index and also to make this come to life, we had to look at 22 indicators covering around 8 policy areas and also assessing different characteristics. And with this, we had to define what will be our indicators for the model, how are we going to collect data that can feed into these indicators, and that way come up with index results that speak to the current ecosystem, but also be able to let us know what does the future then look like from where we are at right now.
Thank you, Mercy. But I think I want to...
Brenda,
Yes?
if you permit me, I just wanted to chime in on that very, very briefly as well, because you asked a question about why the use of technology and sort of why we're presenting it this way. And I think, thank you so much, Mercy, for that answer. I just wanted to bring another perspective to that question, which is the fact that it was deliberate to put an index in place as opposed to other forms of presenting data. We do research on the creative economy in Africa every other time, every other year. And it sits down in some library, it sits in some website until people are trying to do some literature review, and they come across some research that was done 5 years ago, 10 years ago. A lot of things, resources that have been underutilized, are out there in the public domain. But we asked ourselves, what is that thing we can do to make this data interactive and to make it slightly provocative? Because we believe that it's in the provocation that conversations will be triggered. And that was why we said, let's do a ranking, because when you see yourself ranking low on the index, that becomes a point of conversation. That becomes a positive controversy, because you would want to find out what Johannesburg has done to come tops on the list, right? And you would want to make efforts to exchange ideas, to adopt ideas, to adapt policies, to do whatever you need to do to climb up the ladder. And so it was more like, let's inspire cities and let's trigger conversations through a positive provocation. And that's what led us to presenting our data in an index format, as opposed to just presenting it on some websites that people can make reference to during their academic work. So I just wanted to chime in and add that little bit. Thank you.
Thank you, Victor. I was just about to ask you a little bit about what you already just mentioned. But if I was going to say, I wanted to just be clear to the audience in the room that a lot of it was computer science engineering. They did quite a bit of coding and data mining and machine learning and those things that we creatives, more often than not, we don't know anything about. But I wanted to point out the intersection between culture and technology and how it is now useful as a tool like this, where you can just quickly see where you rank and how you can advocate for yourself, for your city, for your municipality, whatever it is, what they need to do, to be able to match up or even, do better than another city rather. And I wish you were here, Mercy, to take us through the tool live so that everybody could see it. I don't know if we have that kind of technology at the moment to be able to go through the website but I'm sure by the time we're closing, we'll put the website back on. It's really exciting, it's fun. You fiddle with it. There's no hard and fast rule. You just go around it, and it's to show you all the cities, how they are ranked against all the things that they've measured them against, as was in the video. I think I have
If you have something, I'm happy to do the runover for the model.
What did you say?
I'm saying I'm happy to do a quick run-through of the ranking.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
I'm happy to do a quick demo of the ranking of the actual index.
Yeah, and you might not be able to interact with it from where you are, but they're going to figure it out and let us know, most importantly. Rashida, when you look at the Creative Vibrancy Index tool and you think about all the work that you do, and then you think about the creatives that you serve, how does this help your work?
Yeah, what I've really liked about the tool is that it's been an iterative learning tool, and that there's been multiple touch points and ways in through consultation, roundtables, with lots of different stakeholders, which is also the way that we work, whether it's with artists or policymakers, who feeding in the data. And I think that's so important, because this is a process-based approach of working. It's action learning, and that's key for successful city building, and we need to do these things together. We can't have a policy without bringing the people along the way. That journey of consultation is really key. So at that angle of policy making, I think it's a really interesting tool to instigate dialogues, and we have actively used the tool. I've got very great case studies where now that I can talk to an MP in Uganda and say, we've got this fantastic tool. In the first series of research, Kampala wasn't represented, but it will be in the next set from the Vibrancy Index. And that is, these cities do compete with each other. We want to be represented. We want, Rachel Magula, it's really interesting to ignite the conversation now that the tool exists. And so I think that's what was really exciting when I first saw that opportunity. But policy interventions don't just stay in the space of the policymakers. It's also taking that conversation directly to the artists that we work with and having those roundtable convenings. And I see that that continues to be an opportunity for driving forward the importance of making the case for the creative economy, where sometimes we still obviously need to advocate continuously for it being taken seriously as a driver of economic growth, not for a city, for a country.
Thank you. If I was going to ask you, Victor, this was kind of like a pilot, yes?
Yes.
How many cities did we x-ray in this first pilot?
We had 12 cities cutting across the different geographical regions of Africa: Central Africa, North Africa, Southern, West, and East.
And when you were ranking the cities, were you only ranking capital cities?
Okay, so the idea was to start with the most economically important, I don't know if I'm trying to choose the word, but the most economically significant city in the country to start with. And so in Nigeria, for instance, Lagos is not the capital. Abuja is the capital of Nigeria, but economic vibrancy and economic significance, of course, is Lagos. And so that was the consideration, to start with that. And then when we expand, because we're looking to expand, the idea is that we'll do this every other year. We'll update the index with more cities and then update the information on the previously existing cities. So the idea is to expand into more cities and then possibly going to second cities and countries. For example, in Ivory Coast, we're looking at something like Abidjan and Yamoussoukro. In Nigeria, you'll be looking at Lagos, Abuja. In Kenya, you're looking at Nairobi and perhaps, what's the other city?
Mombasa.
I can't remember now. But, the idea is that you look at the next most economically significant city, as we expand. But right now, we have not exhausted the first cities. We're still on 12, and we are hoping that the iteration we expect in 2025 would expand it to 20 to 24 cities. That's the plan.
I was just about to ask you that, so thank you for jumping in. I think my last question for you, Victor, is What impact have you seen so far? This tool was launched last year. Have you heard any actionable feedback? Have you heard what people are asking you for? And what else is in this tool that we can look forward to?
Okay, I'll start with what else is in the tool that we can look forward to. Then I come to some of the feedback we've received so far. And in terms of what else is in the tool, I think people have sort of downplayed availability of a database. So most people who have interacted with the tool seem to be so focused on the rankings. It's very important and it's front and center. That's what we want to use to attract the attention of all the audience groups and stakeholders to this important tool. But beyond the rankings of the cities, we've also got a very rich database, which is a very important resource. And I think that's the what else in your question. That database needs to be utilized. We need to understand that you can filter by cities and filter by the 22 indicators. We've got 22 indicators. You can filter by the cities and by the indicators to find out what exists per city. You can find out how many cultural monuments and cultural monuments and historical sites exist in Cairo that were recorded to give Cairo the rank that they have in cultural vibrancy. You can also filter to find out film festivals. You can filter to find out venues, studios, film studios, and cinemas, and venues and facilities. So quantitative information is also very readily available on that portal. And so my encouragement is for people to sort of use the portal, use the tool in its entirety. It's a very robust and comprehensive one. Then as to the feedback, we are not under the illusion that once we launch the index and we have this wonderful tool that solves all the problems that we need or we have in the industry. So it's something that takes time. And Brenda, you alluded to this when you spoke about creating the foundations for the generation of 15-year-olds right now. So this is more of a foundational tool. And we believe that as time goes on, deeper into the years to come, we would see more and more positive impact and significance of this tool for the industry. But so far, I would tell you that what has stood out for me, what has been more different for us, is the fact that there is an uptake by institutions, very credible institutions, whether they are multilateral institutions or cultural organizations. And why this is important is because investors look to institutions to provide data that feeds their business decisions. For example, we got an information from the World Culture for a couple of days that Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, OECD, in Europe, is interested in the work of the index, and they would love to do some research that builds upon the work that the index provides or the information that the index provides. And so you can see that this is a very credible multilateral institution in Europe, building upon the work that the index has done already. And that's beautiful for me, because I believe that investors would want to look to the reputation of the institutions that are picking up this research, that are picking up the information and data supplied here, and they will make their decisions on those bases. Every now and then we see investors and businesses making decisions on the basis of data, the IMF or provided by the World Bank on economic statistics in countries. And so this is the type of thing we want. We want this index to be that type of instrument for the creative economy in Africa, so that investors, policymakers can see it as a credible source of information and insight with which to inform the decisions and the policy directions that they come up with. And we see that happening already, although in small ways, but we believe that as time goes on and we socialize this tool much more, people get to know about it and are more aware of it, we will see more and more uptake. But to me, that's a very significant achievement.
And just to conclude, so the tool is useful for the creative in terms of being listed. So for you to know, creatives are listed, right? Creative institutions are listed.
Yes.
And of course, there's a ranking for cities. So it's not just a tool for cities alone, it's a tool for creatives. And if it's socialized in the way and manner that I think it's going to continue to be, if you're not on that list, are you a creative in Africa? Are you? So I'd like to take some last thoughts from you, and then questions from the audience.
Sure. I mean, for me, the last thoughts are that any city, if you take the 22 indicators in the index, you would be able to measure yourselves against those, because they are so user-friendly, and the detail with which they are described is also very easy for cities that are not part of the research to actually interface. And also very useful lessons and criticism for policymakers and funding institutions in terms of funding models that they use and how those can be better structured, how a greater appreciation and knowledge of culture can be used as a catalyst to unlock more funding, whether within the country or from outside sources. So these are some of the useful tools that one can use from the index.
Thanks.
I think it's a very exciting example of making research tangible and to putting it in the hands of whether it's a policymaker or an artist. The decision to make it an interactive website was not the immediate, but that's what has been the result. And I think that's really exciting about where it can take action-led research.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Thanks. And they've gone. Oh, they're still there. All right. Last words from you, Mercy.
My last words will be to echo the importance of this index in terms of promoting accessibility of information. Again, as we have said, it ranks a lot of things across Africa, and that way we'd encourage all of you to just take a look at the website. I saw someone on the chat box ask the name of the platform, and we're going to provide a link on the chat box. But then again, it's a platform for everyone to access information. We'll keep rolling out more and more insights into the index, so be on the lookout for that.
Okay, thank you very much, Mercy. I didn't wear my glasses. I was trying to be cute. So, to Vuyisile, when looking at the successes and failures of the Maboneng precinct here in City of Joburg, how does your department and the land use department come together to create spaces that prevent gentrification of spaces, which at times lead to socio-economic and, the question didn't finish, something social, social creative exclusion within the community, the spaces find themselves. Is that clear to you?
Yes, but it's quite an involved question because it traverses many functions that some of them sitting at local government level, but others at a provincial and national government level. For example, the question of gentrification is really something that the country is contending with. And gentrification is an unintended consequence of, capitalist expansion. And we have to find ways of mitigating against the negative effects of capitalism as a system. And I think that, it's something that we have to talk about. Maboneng as a precinct has got many successes. It has created many opportunities. But I think central also to, the success of precincts is to look at the sustainability model of the individual businesses that exist within that precinct. And very often we find that, people go into business not because they are necessarily driven by entrepreneurial instinct, but it is for survival reasons. And you find that certain businesses will quickly fail because they are not founded on the correct foundation and they're also not driven by the correct principles. For example, businesses that continue to be dependent on external funding and not really centering themselves around building a brand that creates a greater demand in the market that drives your sustainability independent of government intervention or other forms of intervention. And I think that the city has played a key role in enabling the creation of the precinct, but at the end of the day, in terms of the thriving of enterprises there, we have to look at the models of the individual businesses that exist within it. Thank you.
Thank you. That feels like a good answer. Has there been a thought to develop a tripartite alliance between Cairo, Lagos, Joburg to lean across vibrancy/economic enabling environments, respectively. I feel like this is a question for the three governments, but I'm going to ask Victor. Did you hear the question? The question, should I repeat it, Victor? Oh, it's frozen again. Okay.
Yes, please. Question.
Should I repeat the question?
Yeah, please, repeat the question, please.
Has there been a thought to develop a tripartite alliance between Cairo, Lagos, Joburg to lean on vibrancy/economic enabling environments, respectively?
Okay, thank you so much. It's a very technical question, but I think what we've been doing is to create the understanding that peer-to-peer learning is very important. And so we've been trying to prioritize peer-to-peer learning and connections, cultural exchanges. Right now, there hasn't been anything concrete, but the idea around this is that there will be wraparound activities ahead of every launch of an iteration. You see what I mean? So if we are planning to launch in 2025, the next version of the index, and the idea is that around that launch, in the build-up to that launch, or right after the launch, there will be opportunities for policymakers and for actors in the various cities to come together, like the question said, form an alignment or form an exchange, or just create something that allows exchange of knowledge. It allows you to adopt policies and adapt policies that has made a city thrive in one indicator versus another indicator, and you may not have thrived very well in that indicator. And so those opportunities exist, and that's what we are trying to let policymakers and city administrators understand. We are here to facilitate, but we will not directly do that. It's left for the city administrators to sort of take up that initiative with our facilitation, come together and find out how they can learn a couple of things from Cairo, learn a couple of things from Lagos and from Johannesburg, and by so doing, the index is fulfilling its mission.
And I'm going to respond, so I'm going to take off my moderator hat and put on my creative economy lead hat. And this work sits under our portfolio as Creative Economy, as the team that works for Creative Economy. And we're going to build an African Cities Network. That's what we're going to do. We're going to hopefully find the partners who help with the funding, and we're going to build an African Cities Network, and we're going to meet in Africa. And then we're going to have a conversation with ourselves face-to-face, and hopefully it will spark the conversations around how to model, against each other, how to, you understand. As British Council, that's the most we can do: convene, support, try to enable. But at the end of the day, what we're looking at is what is the policy on culture in each country, And this is where, when you're looking at your future careers and you think you want to work in the creative sector, I think there's also the opportunity to look at policy advocacy, working in the management of the arts like we do for the British Council and he does for the city of Joburg. But that's a consideration, as part of your contribution to building a vibrant creative economy for Africa. I'm going to go to the next question. To Victor and Mercy, the index focuses on the urban. In the case of Johannesburg, the city spans beyond the metropolitan boundary into neighbor, peri-urban, and village contexts. Do you guys take these spaces into consideration when collecting data? I think Victor answered this a little bit earlier. I'm sorry, I keep looking back. Victor, are you there?
He's there.
Yeah.
I am here.
Okay,
Can
so
you see me?
yes, I can. So I know you answered this when I said, what's next, and you said this is the reason why we picked the cities. So could you just tell us just a little more about this question? The index focuses on the urban. In case of Johannesburg, the city spans beyond the metropolitan boundary into neighbor, peri-urban, and village contexts. Did you guys take those spaces into consideration when collecting data?
Yes, the data gathering was quite wide, and we have, I think it was published, Mercy, the methodology and how data was gathered and sort of all the considerations. there was a lot of considerations that went into this. And, you know, one of the key challenges was that we needed to have something that was consistent across the 12 cities. Otherwise, you can't measure it. It's not going to be measurable if we are seeing something in Johannesburg and we can't see the same thing or in the same shape and form in Lagos, and it becomes difficult to do the comparison. And so it was quite a struggle to get consistent data across the different cities. And so when we talk about things that exist outside of urban areas, I think it can be quite tricky. But we did our best to ensure that the indicators reflect the cultural peculiarities in an African setting, right? So in developing the index, we had conversations with the World Cities Culture Forum, we had conversations with the European Union Creative Cities Network, we had conversations with the Joint Research Council at the EU as well. So we looked at a lot of Western-styled similar projects. But what we told ourselves was that we've got to make this an African thing, and we've got to measure culture the way it is defined, the way it is consumed and produced in Africa. But I can tell you that it's still work in progress. The next iteration, we are hoping to cover the African peculiarities and context even much more than the first one did. And so that's why it's work in progress. But we understand and we acknowledge the need to ensure that what indicators we are putting together do not only reflect an urban context of culture, an urban definition of culture, but also takes into context some of those things that happen outside of the urban areas. And you would even see, when you look at the indicators, the breakdown of indicators, you would see that there are a number of things that reflect, you know, how culture is produced and understood in Africa that you may not find in some other Western type of research of this nature, right? And so we're doing our best to ensure that that coverage continues to expand, and we hope to see more of that in the next iteration.
Okay, we have a question in the room.
Okay, thank you. Firstly, congratulations on the...
Sorry, I can't hear.
Oh, you can hear me?
Yeah, you need to put the mic up.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, please.
Wow, okay. Congratulations on the index. I think it's a very great tool. But I think I'll do injustice to myself as someone who's born in Johannesburg and has lived here and in Cape Town all my life if I don't talk about the elephant in the room. And this, I'm sure you'll expect this, but Vuyisile, it's about the issue of crime. As a person who's representing the creatives in the city of Johannesburg, both the Tish communities, which is your townships, informal settlements, and hostels. The index is great, and it's good that we first, but the elephant in the room here is the issue of crime, because you know that a lot of the creative work that gets done, whether in the studio or it's dance or in community halls, that normally gets done in the evening, you know, and crime becomes a major factor. So the question is, how are we going to look at that and make sure that we don't lose who we are in the context of what's happening? And then in the space of crime. And as a woman, I've been almost hijacked, moving from a studio to another, to my home. And so it's also very personal. And then the other one is, historically, we used to have, at my age, I've got historical experience as well. We used to have youth clubs where people would go and dance and, you know, after school, and the older youth would go into practice for choir and all that. But what has happened is a lot of things have moved more to the bigger places like the Soweto Theatre, the Joburg Theatre, and in communities, we've lost all those, and that affects the moral fiber. How are we going to try and bring those back into that space? Okay.
Okay, should I respond, because I see we've got 30 seconds left.
Yes, so
Okay.
I was going to say that that's not an index question, but I think he's doing two things here today. So he's your representative from your city, and then he's helping us talk about the index. So what I'm going to do is have him address you particularly with your particular questions, because I'm from Lagos, I don't have your context, so it's, you know, it's part of, yeah. So he's going to have to talk to you after this. We're gonna, yeah.
But I can give a quick answer that in
It's
terms
done.
of the index.
I'm on a time.
Oh, okay,
Yes.
that's fine.
Albie is the boss here. Thank you. I want to say thank you to the panelists. Thank you, Victor. Thank you, Mercy. Thank you to the crowd and to the provocations that have come. Thank you for the questions as well. We'll see you somewhere soon. Look out for the index. Go to the website and put in your details. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.